Welcome into the Early Edge NFL Divisional Round Mega Preview presented by BetMGM. I am so excited to be back on the air with these guys, Mike McClure and RJ White. And guys, this is a big show as we welcome them in. This is a pretty big show. When you go 6-0 against the spread, we missed one teaser, and you're on a 10-2 run. There's a lot of pressure on us today. We've got to deliver for the fans out there. And before we get going, guys, what is the one thing that jumped out at you most from Wild Card Weekend? Start with you, Mikey.
You know, there are a couple things. Number one, just Houston obviously had an awesome performance, and C.J. Stroud once again proved that he was able to protect the football. We'll see if he's able to do that on the road. And then number two, really for me, when you look at the Packers, this team, I personally is one that speculated that they were definitely better in the dome and the controlled environment, but that they were going to be able to sustain drives. And Jordan Love is really going to benefit from having a guy like Aaron Jones healthy, who we talked about really on this show and across some of the others. Looked like one of the best running backs in the NFL over the last 4 weeks heading into this. Looked fantastic again against Dallas. So I'm certainly fascinated to see what they can do against a well-rested San Francisco defense.
RJ.
Yeah, it's got to be the Packers for me. I mean, Jordan Love looks like Aaron Rodgers reincarnate at this point. He's gone 9 games and thrown one interception in the course of those 9 games, multiple touchdowns in 8 of those games. And we're not giving him enough credit. I mean, it feels weird to call him a top 5 quarterback in the league, but that's what he has performed like over this last 2 months, really. He's doing it with a reduced, system around him with all these injuries they've dealt with. Now they're mostly fully healthy for these playoff games. We saw what that looked like against Dallas, where they're throwing up 48 against a team that typically plays pretty good defense at home. So really excited to see what he can do against the team that everybody's penciling into the Super Bowl here in the 49ers.
I'm impressed with how neat you keep your room, RJ, and I'm also impressed with Jordan Love and what he's done the second half of the season. And the way Aaron Jones is running, that was the missing piece for this Packers offense. I just wonder, though, when you have those number 1 seeds that are sitting there and waiting, and we don't get to see them, and we kind of forget about how dominant they are, and then you see C.J. Stroud and you see Jordan Love put on the show that they did, that recency bias, I believe, is a factor that's keeping both of those lines under double digits. But let's get right into that first game that we're talking about, and that's the Texans at the Ravens. BetMGM dealing Baltimore -9. They've been off for 3 weeks now after not playing anyone against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You go back to that first matchup, 25-9. CJ Stroud did not get intercepted, but he did take 5 sacks, including one on 4th and 1. He did lose a fumble. For me, I'm leaning Ravens here because Kyle Hamilton will be back. He started to practice towards the end of last week. That rest is critical. And I just think, you go from the controlled conditions that he had against the Browns defense that I was wrong about. I thought they would show up on the road. RJ, you were 100% right on that one, that their road splits. And Mike, you also said it. The road splits were meaningful with that Browns defense, but the Texans took advantage of that. I don't think they can take advantage of a Ravens defense giving up 5.1 yards per attempt, by far the lowest in the NFL. I am leaning Ravens. RJ, what are you doing on this game?
Yeah, you mentioned the 25-9. This was a similar line. It was around 9.5 for that game as well. And it turns out the market was underrating both teams. We didn't know what the Texans were in week 1. They came into the season as I think the co-lowest Super Bowl odds of anyone, the co-biggest long shot. And here they are, one of the final 8 teams. And even with that, going from that Super Bowl long shot to the divisional round, I could argue the market underrated Baltimore more because it turns out they're historically good. You look at stats like DVOA, they are just dominating and really comparing to some of the best teams we've seen in the last 20 years. Houston's offense, like you said, the success comes through the passing game. Baltimore is first in yards per pass, and they've had some big wins against some elite pass offenses like San Francisco, like Miami. And their defense also top 10 in sack rate and interception rate. So they are capable of making big plays, but also great situationally, including second in the red zone. Houston's defense has not faced an offense that finished higher than 14th in yards per play since that game against Baltimore in week 1. This is a massive step up for that unit that has not really been tested since week 1. And that Baltimore offense is top 5 in yards per play. So Houston's defense typically great versus the run, struggles versus the pass. Baltimore's offense has shown it could do either of those things. I think Baltimore's offense has success in this game. I'm not sure that Houston can keep up against a very good defense. So I'm also leaning to Baltimore covering the number. If you can get it in single digits, I think it's still worth laying for Baltimore.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that affects perception is how the Ravens came out when they were the 1 seed that year, when Derrick Henry kind of punched them in the mouth and they got the lead and they jumped on them. I don't think the Texans have that kind of offense to do that to Baltimore. Mike, where are you going on this game?
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think I posed this question on HQ last night, and I want to ask you guys as well, because I firmly believe that if the Texans had just beaten the Browns by a normal outcome, and what I mean by that, say they win the game by 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 7 points. If that were the outcome and it was a final drive or they made a stand to win the game like that, I think the number that we would see here would be 10.5. And that may be where it closes, frankly. But that's where I make the number. I made it all the way up to 10.5 for the Ravens. It's always the rust versus rest question when you get to this point. But I think giving that Ravens defense a home game is significant. And then the other thing I want to talk about with CJ Stroud, we talk about home road splits. He hasn't really played a ton recently outdoors in a road environment. You look at their last 1, 2, 3, 4 games they played at home, or on the road against the Colts in another dome in a controlled environment. Didn't play the Titans game where Case Keenum led them to a 3-point overtime win. He played against the Jets outside. They scored just 6 points. Since November 1st, he's played just 2 games outdoors. I think it's somewhat concerning when you're talking about a rookie quarterback against an elite defense here. So if there was a time for him to not be able to take care of the football, for this offense to struggle, which I think they're going to have no chance running the football here, I think this is all Ravens all the way. And again, I think a normal win over Cleveland, this thing's 10.5.
Cleve TA, one of the many guys I follow on Twitter, pointed out that teams coming off the big upset win, like the Texans, like the Bucs, like the Packers, 15-22 against the number in the next round, and 3-6 against the number when they won those games by 14 plus, which all of them did. What about the total here? 44, RJ.
Yeah, total's interesting. We're going to have to track how this weather's going to look in Baltimore. I kind of think that it could come under the 44. I think it has come down a few points since it opened, just under the premise that the Texans are probably going to struggle in this environment outdoors, like Mikey was talking about, and the Ravens, with their very strong running game, will be able to ice down the clock in the second half. Probably not going to look to put up 40 points in this game by any means. Just get out the door with a win and keep everybody healthy moving on to the AFC Championship game. So I can understand why this is trending down. I'm interested to hear where Mikey thinks it should settle. I'm probably still leaning under at this number. If it gets any lower than that, though, it's probably just a stay away.
Mike, what's your view on the total?
Yeah, so I've got it at 44.4. So basically 44.5 is where I think it should be. And the reason for that, I'm heavy on the Ravens side as well. Again, make the number up over 10 for the Ravens. So what I worry about, if you're looking at the total here and you want to go under, grab it now. Do not let it get to 43. There are a number of scenarios. One that I think we could see is a 30-13 victory from the Ravens that would, you're sitting at a push condition at that point. But my worry is here, kind of like Buffalo. They're basically, you're talking Ravens performance where they end up with 4 touchdowns. And if they do score the 4 touchdowns here, it's likely a scenario that you're going over this total that's been bet down. So I agreed with the market move out from 46 down 44. Again, 41 and 44 being pretty key numbers here in the league. If you want to play under, I would say this is your last chance. I would not go under 43, which I think this game ultimately closes at 10 and 43.
Looking like rain in the forecast. The wind not looking too bad right now, 8 to 10 miles per hour. RJ, is this a game you would be looking to tease, especially if you can find an 8.5?
Yeah, at 8.5, it's a great teaser number. I just don't know what else exists that I'd be willing to tease it with. I know there's a big, blinking sign on -2.5, and Mikey would love teasing the Chiefs up at that number. But the way the Chiefs have played, we'll get into that game. That game could go either way for me. Chiefs could win by 20, lose by 20. Nothing would really surprise me in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Mikey?
Yeah, I mean, I would consider teasing it at 8.5. I think that's a big reason why you're not going to find a ton of 8.5s left floating out there. I'm going to quickly check. Yeah, it's mostly been dried up. I think, like I said, I think if anything, this thing's headed to 10 at this point. So you're probably not going to get the opportunity to. But if you do find 8.5s, if we do get some buying back on the Texans side, I personally would pair it with Kansas City plus 8.5. If you want to play Lions money line as well, I think that's okay. I think the 8.5 on the Kansas City side is a little stronger than what would ultimately be Lions minus a half a point.
Yeah, that's one of my wishful thinking lines because we are seeing 9.5. It's trending up, not down. We didn't have any official plays on that one. We have a ton of official plays on the 3 remaining games. But first, I want to ask you, where are you going to make the bets that you're going to have for divisional weekend? New BetMGM customers, if you sign up today, you get $158 in bonus bets. You place your first wager of at least $5, you get $158 instantly in bonus bets, regardless of your wager's outcome. You have to use bonus code EDGE158. That is EDGE158. We are back with 6 official plays on the remaining games, 6 or 7. But we got to hear from one of our sponsors. It's This next one is going to be fascinating. The Packers at the 49ers. And, I just don't see the Packers offense being slowed down. I think the Packers are going to give up a ton of points. The way that I would attack this game, guys, is the Packers team total over. That's the play that I like best so far, but I haven't locked in anything. Mike, I know you have locked in on this already. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm on the Packers side here, Larry. I liked it a lot at 10. I'll still play it at 9.5. I still think there's enough room left on it. I made this number down to 7. I think Green Bay's been a little underrated. As far as San Francisco, I think there's a little doubt that they're the best team in the NFL, certainly in the NFC, and should be north, 7+ favorite in this game. I just think that Green Bay is going to have some success, like you mentioned, offensively. So I like that look on the team total. If you're looking at the Packers here when they're healthy, what's kind of fascinating is that route that they put on the Dallas Cowboys there. Arguably 2 of their better receivers, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson. Now, keep in mind, Watson was returning from injury, but he did play a significant number of snaps there. They combined for 1 reception and 9 yards in that game. It was a lot of Aaron Jones, a lot of Dobbs. Tight ends were involved. It looked a lot like some of the earlier days for Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not saying Jordan Love is there yet, but I think he's got that kind of upside, and I think he's certainly playing with a lot of confidence right now. He's got a number of playmakers out there, and the one thing that I think that they can do is they can sustain drives long enough to eat up 5-6 minutes at a time, which is what we know San Francisco is likely going to do as well. So I think that by that, just the game getting shortened, I think the back door is going to be open at the very least here. I expect them to be competitive. Again, I made the number in this one 7, so I'll take the Packers plus 9.5. Or 10. I think if you want to wait it out, you can wait it out and hope for 10s again. I do not see it dipping below 9, no matter how much action comes in on the Packers side. So play at 9.5, wait it out for the 10 if you want. Again, I don't think you're at risk going to 8.5.
Mikey, Jinx the Mouse can get Chiefs plus 9, Ravens minus 2 at 130, minus 130. Are you going to play that? Would you recommend that?
I don't hate it at minus 130. I would typically expect that price point to be closer to minus 140, getting those numbers. So, yeah, I don't mind it if you're truly getting the minus 130 on it. I think it's pretty close to fair value.
And if we're talking about pairing those teams without being able to tease them traditionally, Mike M can get Chiefs plus 9, Ravens minus 7 at plus 119. RJ, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't love the Chiefs side of it. Like I've said, I could go any way for me. And Mike's way better at the math with these type of random numbers than I am. So he'd be the best one to say, but I wouldn't play that at that number.
Mike, also no?
Yeah, no, not at that number. Not when you're laying the minus 7 on a, again, depending on, you're not with the laying the minus 7 on the Ravens side where you essentially lose if it's a push or dropping that leg out. I would not play that.
Okay, and now RJ, Mike is on the side. You have a prop in this one. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm taking Aaron Jones to go over 95.5 rush and receiving yards. The combo line is at -115. And he's just been dominant on the ground. He's had 4 straight games of over 100 yards rushing with 20 plus carries in each of those games. Hasn't really had to work much as a receiver because they have dominated those games. But in a situation where they do fall behind, he is going to be used as a receiver. He's had several games this year where he's getting 6, 7 targets, 4 or 5 receptions, and into that 30 to 50 receiving yard bucket there. So we're kind of protecting ourselves. If the Packers do get blown out, we might not hit that rush number, but I think that receiving number is going to save us. He's going to get over 100 combined yards either way here. So that's why I like playing them over. And I love what Mikey said about the number there with the he would make it +7, because I had it at 7.5 and I thought I was crazy. I thought, that they were just 7.5 at the Cowboys, ended up 7. And the 49ers are obviously better than the Cowboys. So nobody would take the Packers if it was 7.5. But I'm glad that we're kind of on the same page there.
This is a number I think that's going to be on the rise, like Aaron Jones props were last week. And A.J. Dillon, if he comes back, does that matter at all at this point with the way Aaron Jones is playing?
No, I don't think you can feature him at all really over Aaron Jones with what he's doing. Like Mike said, he's looked like one of the top 4 or 5 running backs in the league right now. He's fresh. He hasn't played a ton early in the season due to some injuries, and it's really showing. And if they're going to go further than this game, and they're already further than where people expected them, he's going to have a lot to do with it. And Jordan Love is playing awesome. He's playing like Aaron Rodgers right now, but Aaron Jones is really helping that offense go and taking the pressure off him. And because Jordan Love is playing solo, you can't load up the Bucs against Aaron Jones and focus too much on him, because Jordan Love can go 5, 6, 7 other different ways, and he's shown the ability to do that with different receivers.
Mikey.
Yeah, I think RJ's spot on there. The only thing that I would not invest heavily on with Aaron Jones is touchdown scoring props, just because that is where A.J. Dillon would factor in. And I don't think we've seen the end of Jordan Love creating near the goal line. He looked fantastic in situations like that. Having guys like Watson, Jaden Reed, who, again, did literally nothing against Dallas, when they're healthy with everyone there and potentially having him, I would not invest in Aaron Jones TD props, but I do love the combo yardage.
Excuse me, guys. I was just checking Jair Alexander news. Unclear if he'll be ready to go, which would be a big blow for the Packers. But before we move on from this game, Kittle over 51.5 receiving yards from Brandon Silva in the chat. We saw Jake Ferguson have a pretty good game. Mikey, thoughts on that? And then thoughts on the total 50.5 in Packers 49ers.
Yeah, it's a scary click, but I'm leaning under only because I think San Francisco wants to shorten the game in a sense, and I think Green Bay is going to have success sustaining drives. As far as George Kittle, I'm certainly not playing the under on it. My preferred way to play George Kittle in these kind of games is going to be through his longest reception prop. I think he does have one big play in him, kind of down the seam. I think that's where he's going to mostly be involved. I think the scenario where I would just want to play a ton of Kittle would be the scenario where you think they could be live to lose the game, or at least be extremely, extremely competitive throughout. So I would look more at his longest reception personally.
And Packers insider Max S in the chat says Jair is most likely playing. So that is good news for the Packers, but we will wait to hear the official updates. RJ, where do you stand on this total 50.5?
Yeah, gut tells me it's going to go over just because of how the Packers offense is playing, and we know what San Francisco can do. I mean, Katie Mox talks about it on the Pick Six show every Thursday. It's like that's her auto play is 49ers team total over. So these two offenses just playing very well. 11-12, San Francisco's 12 wins have been by double digits, and the other just missed by that meaningless last-second field goal in the first Rams game. But many of them look kind of less impressive in retrospect. I mean, we're talking about the best teams they've beaten. Our teams like the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Seahawks twice, and guess what? None of those teams are playing this weekend. So, I'm not I have them rated even with Baltimore just because of, their body of work on the season and how strong they look against a lot of these teams. But, that might be a little bit of a fallacy. They might not be in that tier. Baltimore obviously showed head-to-head they're much better. So it'll be interesting to see if this defense crumbles a little bit against an offense playing very well. So I definitely wouldn't play the under. If anything, I know you talked about the Packers team total over. I'd look at one of these team total overs. Could be either one of them, whichever I'm getting the better number for.
I saw you locked in Green Bay +10 on SportsLine. Maybe it was yesterday. Would you still play it under 10?
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier with Mikey, I have it at 7.5, and part of that is making a big ratings adjustment upward for Green Bay. I liked Dallas last week once they got to 7 because I thought the line should be 7.5, 8, a little higher than that, and I thought that they would crumble in that matchup on the road against the Cowboys, and they obviously did not. They're playing better than just about any offense right now, up on that tier with all the best offenses in the league. So at 9.5, I think is still fine. I would probably play it down to 8.5, maybe even 8, even though it's not going to get there.
And I just think it's interesting because the 49ers, their weakness defensively, when they have been weak, has been on the ground. And that's what the Cowboys had the same scenario. So in some sense, it is a good matchup for the Packers offense to at least get Aaron Jones going. Mikey, did you want to jump in?
No, I'm not. I have a lean on the under on the total, but again, like I said, very uncomfortable click. I do think that, like you're mentioning, though, I think that the Packers will have some success on the ground, and I think that they'll have some interest in working as much clock as they possibly can, trying to keep it a one-score game.
And again, we're recording this on Tuesday. You've got to check the latest weather reports before you lock in any bets on a total. Guys, we had 2 official plays on that one. We're going to the Sunday slate now, and we're going to talk about Buccaneers and Lions, and we've got a strong difference of opinion on this one. I'm going to go first. I'm on the Buccaneers, and it's not because of what they did to the Eagles last night, who didn't show up, because now they're going to face a Lions team. The secondary is not good, but they will hit you. They will get near you. Where we saw receivers last night running wide open, guys not even trying to tackle them, and the tackling attempts were such a joke by the Eagles. The Lions will hit you hard. You know, some will say, referring to their safeties, that they'll hit you dirty too. But they're definitely a tough team, and they're not going to let the Bucs just waltz into the end zone. But this Buccaneers team, the defense to me is what stands out. 1 touchdown allowed over the last 10 quarters. The run defense allowing about 3.5 yards per carry over the last month. You have Todd Bowles and his blitzing. He blitzed a lot last night, and we know Jared Goff is susceptible to the blitz. And you know that the Lions will want to run the ball. That's their MO. But this Buccaneers front with Vita Vea and everybody healthy, to me, is a defense that can give the Lions enough trouble. Baker's covered 4 straight as a dog, 7 of 8 as a dog. And the Lions secondary, the number 1 most explosives allowed this season. We saw the Rams average 7.7 yards per play against them, which is an obscene amount. And we've seen the last 4 quarterbacks. Nick Mullins twice, 396 and 411. Dak threw for 345. Stafford threw for 367. I think Baker Mayfield, he's better than Nick Mullins, but he can have success with those weapons against a very vulnerable Lions secondary. We can cover this game 27-21, 27-24, 24-20. I like the Bucs to be competitive. RJ, have I convinced you?
Absolutely not. Like I just think the Lions are clearly in a better tier than the Buccaneers right now. You said you're not basing it on last week. Last week doesn't matter. That team that they played should not have been in the playoffs at that point. You look back to the first game, they won the first game 20-6 on the road in Tampa without Jahmyr Gibbs, and had a much tougher test last week and survived. I mean, that was the emotional game of all emotional games. First home playoff game in 3 decades, having to face Matthew Stafford, the longtime franchise quarterback, in a spot where everybody was picking the Rams, and they went out, they got it done, they got the win. And Tampa just is not anywhere near the same class as Detroit for me. Their offense is 30th in red zone success rate. Did not matter against a Philadelphia defense like that you said had no interest in tackling anyone. Detroit can give up big plays too, but they can also hit you. And as you were talking about, and make you think twice about going over the middle on some of those plays where it was just wide open for them against the Eagles. The Detroit defense does struggle against the pass, but this is going to be easier matchup for them this week after facing Stafford. And unlike in that game, they have no need to worry about Tampa running the ball, the worst running team in the league. And I know Rachaad White has done well in fantasy, just not a threat to anybody running the ball in Tampa. So Detroit can really play to take away the pass. And Baker Mayfield, as good as he's been, this is a very tough environment on the road against a very good team. And this is the type of game where it's not all going well for him and things aren't falling the way they should be, like they did against Philly, it could be a little bit of a blowout here. Detroit's offense top 5 in yards per rush, but also yards per pass, so they can focus on the latter if the stout Tampa Bay rush defense shows up. So my only worry here is about Detroit with that defense giving up a backdoor cover. but I just can't fade them at home as the much better team here. Laying only 6, you could still find 6 in the market. Go ahead and do that. I think the line should be 7.5.
Yeah, and just to be frank, I took 6.5, and I would love to get 7 if it got to 7 later in the week. And RJ locked his bet in at 6, so they are different bets. Personally, 27-21. RJ doesn't lose anything. I cash. Mike, settle the dispute.
At 6.5, I have the slightest of leans to the Tampa side. I make the number 6, but getting the hook on the 6.5 is relatively important in that dome in the controlled environment. I think that the back door can be open for Tampa there. I definitely think Detroit wins this game, though. When I look at these two teams, Detroit, they definitely survived the emotional spot. They probably shouldn't have beat the Rams. Rams were awful in the red zone. Some of it Detroit's doing, some of it's not. McVay called a very poor game in some of his game management decisions. But the thing that I keep going back to, you mentioned it, 7.7 yards per play, 9.4 yards per pass. I think that Tampa's going to be able to move the ball between the 20s. I don't know how successful they will be because of the way they run their offense in the red zone either. So I'm out on this game. I'm not playing anything here. The number that I make it is 6. My total is 46.8, so basically 47. Be a slight underlean on the 48.5. But as far as settling it here, pick your favorite guy, because you can find a 6 in the market right now. You can find that 6.5 minus 110 over at BetMGM right now. So you can pretty much find whichever side of this you want to be on. I make it 6, so I'm out, and I'm going to enjoy the game. Maybe look for in-game opportunities, play some DFS, but I will not have a bet on this game.
Mosh Stern in the chat asking about Baker Mayfield over 241. I love it as long as he can stay healthy and avoid Aiden Hutchinson more than a couple of times. I do think this is going to come down to how many big mistakes he makes. I think we can survive one interception, 1 sack fumble. But if there's 2 or 3, then it could get to the blowout scenario that RJ's talking about. Yes, it was 20-6 in week 6. The Lions came in and dominated. They didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery left early with a knee injury. I just think right now you're seeing a totally different Buccaneers defense. This defense, to me, is going to be a problem for the Lions. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was in the first half against the Rams when they just did whatever they wanted. Guys, any strong opinions on the total before I get to my prop?
I don't know about the total, but I was just clicking around as Mikey was talking about strength between the 20s, and you can get Chase McLaughlin to go over 1.5 field goals at plus 100. I mean, this seems like a tailor-made game where he's going to get multiple field goals and Detroit get some stops in the red zone. So that's what I would play. I just think that's great value. I think if people sniff that out, by the time we get to game time, you're going to have a heavy minus number on that over 1.5.
Yeah, especially because of the way they play. And being fairly conservative with the defensive-minded coach. I like that play a lot. My prop in this game, Cade Otton, I bet it this morning at 25.5. By the time I went to enter it on SportsLine, Caesars was up to 30.5. So I entered it there, and we're seeing 27.5 to 31.5 in the market. 11 targets, most on the team last night against the Eagles. 8 catches for 89, and he had a drop. He should have had more. The Lions are a little bit better than the Eagles against tight ends, but tight ends have been going off against the Lions. Twice in the last 4 weeks, they've given up over 100 yards to the tight end position, both against the Vikings, but it wasn't. It was a collection of people, and Cade Otton has no competition for catches. There was one other tight end last night that got a catch, but generally, whenever he's out there, he doesn't block. He runs a route. I mean, he's routinely running 30-plus routes per game. I just love this spot, especially if he's under pressure from Aiden Hutchinson. Baker Mayfield's going to be looking to get rid of it quick, and the big guy over the middle is Cade Otton. Do you guys have any thoughts on props in this game that you like early? I know you haven't locked any in. Mikey, is there anything you're looking at so far prop-wise?
Yeah, I want to focus on Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit. To me, this projects as a decent spot for him. It would be a combo line that I'd be most interested in. But I do think that the Bucs are going to blitz a ton, just like they did against Jalen Hurts. I think they're going to do it a ton to Jared Goff. I do think Detroit's going to be a little better set up to deal with it. I think the obvious look is to Amon St. Brown around the line of scrimmage. I think everyone knows that. But Gibbs, if you watch him play and you watch when they're in competitive games, you can clearly see the elite athletic talent that he is when he gets the football in his hands. I think he's going to have a big day in the receiving game, but I would still take the combo line because I love and respect his upside on the ground. I think he can have a 30-yard rush that would really, really help. So if I were to play it, it would be the combo line, but I think it is a big day for Jahmyr Gibbs.
RJ, any props that jump out at you?
Oh, I gave the kicking one. The other one would be Rachaad White's under on his rushing. Just seems to be a game where Tampa Bay, not an effective rushing team anyway, but they'll get behind at some point and have to abandon the run. And I don't think he's going to get to his number before that point. So unless they surprise everyone and they're playing from ahead in this game and he's getting 18 to 20 carries, I'm not confident he's getting to his number. So love the kicking one I gave for Tampa and definitely love Rachaad White going under. We'll see which direction that moves. If it starts to tip under, then get it early in the week because I think people are going to jump all over that.
And Demon Slayer asking about Sam Laporta. RJ, any thoughts on his numbers so far? He was out there. He played the whole game, made a big catch or two, but not the normal numbers we're used to.
Yeah, very surprising he was out there considering how grave that injury looked when it happened. My worry with him is the risk of re-injury. He made it through that game fine. All it's going to take is, planting your foot wrong at one point, taking a bad hit, and then all of a sudden you're playing overs on a guy that plays, 20 to 30% of the snaps, much less than you had. So if you're going to play it, you're going to play the under. But I'm not super confident in that because it should be a good matchup for him too.
And Joe in the chat is saying you can get my Kate Outen prop at 27.5, which I appreciate, Joe. And I will see you in Vegas. I'm hoping you're going to hook me up at the Fontainebleau. Joe is an executive at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. Last time I checked, guys, we have to get to the game of the weekend, Bills and Chiefs. But first, let's hear from one of our sponsors.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Sunday night, Chiefs at Bills. What a way to close the weekend. This is going to be a classic. I think... RJ said you can see it being a blowout either way, that there's a lot of high variance in this game. I see it being another Chiefs-Bills classic. Patrick Mahomes, 8-1-1 against the number in the 10 times that he's been an underdog. He's never had a playoff game on the road, which is kind of incredible. Mike, you got an official play. Let's hear it.
Kansas City plus 2.5 here for me, Larry. I think the game should be a pick 'em overall. Look, Buffalo's defense has been good at times, especially if you look at overall defensive EPA. I think they are incredibly beat up in this particular matchup. I also like the rest advantage that you have for Kansas City. It's the combination of Buffalo being beat up and the big rest advantage. They played Saturday. Buffalo played Monday. It is a home game for Buffalo, but it is a shorter turnaround with a long week on the Kansas City side. And not only a long week on the Kansas City side, but they've known who they were very, very, very likely to play. It's a familiar matchup, but they've been preparing for this matchup. One that I think is super familiar. So I think Kansas City, while we've had them around 5th in terms of total defense, I think that they are the 3rd best defense in the NFL, maybe the 2nd. By far the best defense Patrick Mahomes has ever had to work with in his career. You continue to watch the guy. He's absolutely incredible with the football in his hands. I think when he plays a guy like Josh Allen, who is mobile and runs, it only leads to Patrick Mahomes running the football more. I think that that's a good thing in this offense. I think it will help spring Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice a little bit more. So I think that Kansas City is going to have success. I think that Pacheco runs hard enough as well that this game ultimately to me comes down to, are we settling for 3 points or 7? Because both of these teams are going to be able to sustain drives and chew clock. So you can't make the turnover, make the mistake. Josh Allen's been a little more prone to doing that. I am terrified of him running all over the Kansas City defense, but I make the game a pick 'em. I think it's going to be an instant classic. And I think Patrick Mahomes is just simply undervalued still, especially in the underdog role.
And before we get to RJ's take on his hometown Bills, and the Chiefs offense somewhat woke up, over 400 yards against Miami. So maybe they're starting to snap out of it. But I got to read some of these Bills defensive injuries, and I don't want to make RJ feel bad. But when you talk about cornerback Christian Benford, linebacker Balin Spector. You got the punter hurt, Sam Martin, Terrell Bernard. Dodson was already out. Connor McGovern, he was in and out, so he's back. Taron Johnson. You also have Rasul Douglas, did not play, but is supposed to be back. So RJ, with that decimated defense, how do you feel about your Bills?
Well, we're not going to have Braylon Spector, so I mean, I got to change my complete cap on this game. And with the punter not in this game, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Mikey said something very interesting about field goals versus touchdowns. And the team that's been settling for a lot of field goals lately has been Kansas City. They are struggling to finish drives offensively. 10 field goals made in their last 2 competitive games. Harrison Butker just marching out there to kick 26-yard field goals, 28-yard field goals over and over. Buffalo's defense is banged up. They have played well since the bye, and they've been dealing with injuries all year. So these injuries at linebacker, that hurts them. Might get one of those guys back. I believe one of those two, Dodson or Bernard, were questionable heading into the game, just like Douglas. So hopefully they'll be able to get him back. So we'll see if Kelsey can take advantage of that, although it really looks like Rice is taking over as the number 1 option. Kelsey just doesn't look as reliable as he has in the past. So we'll see if Douglas is back to help defend Rice, and if Dodson can also return after also missing his questionable last week. The game may hinge on Kansas City's defense, which is very good, slowing down the Buffalo's offense, which is also very good. Both are 5th in yards per play, but Kansas City is 24th in yards per rush. And we've seen this Buffalo offense really focus on running the ball lately, getting James Cook more involved early in the game. Now we're in playoff mode. We know Josh Allen's going to run around with his legs in this situation and really take advantage of the weakness of Kansas City there. Kansas City's defense also just 28th in interception rate. Josh Allen coming off a game without mental mistakes, the first one probably since I started watching it when he was drafted by the Bills. We'll see if he can have 2 in a row. It's probably not likely, but that was really encouraging and a step forward where he wasn't forcing the ball in situations where he didn't need to. With Buffalo's offense and Kansas City's defense both being first in sack rate, I think whichever side wins the battle there could win a close game. If Chiefs are able to get pressure, get to Allen, set up some big third downs, take away the run game from Buffalo, then they're probably going to go and win this game. But if Buffalo's offense is able to block, and that offensive line, particularly the tackles, have been playing well, Buffalo will be able to execute in the run game, score some touchdowns while Kansas City's kicking field goals, and win the game. So I would give Buffalo 2.5 for home field advantage. So the market right now is telling us these teams are even. Mikey obviously believes the Chiefs are much better to make it a pick 'em. I think the Bills are a little bit better. So I think the value here is going to be on the Bills. I think this should be on the other side of 3.
And Josh Allen didn't make any mistakes last game, but that was against the Steelers defense that didn't have TJ Watt, and the game situation put 0 pressure on him. So he was able to do that. And the play calling, giving James Cook the rock was very smart. This definitely will be more high leverage, more pressure, and we'll see if he can avoid those turnovers that have killed the Bills in the past. Mikey, what are you thinking about this total of 46?
Yeah, it's fascinating. You mentioned the range of outcomes in this game. I've got the number 46.3, so right at 46. If I had to play something, I would lean under, believe it or not, still. And the reason for that, while the defenses are good, the offenses are extremely good still. And you've got 2 quarterbacks that are mobile and know how to take advantage of that and can sustain drives and pick up first downs. That clock is going to be moving the entire game here. This, to me, reminds me of one of those games why I talked about field goals versus touchdowns, and then that it may only take 1 interception on either side to settle the difference in this game. I think the drives, like the number of drives overall, are going to be extremely limited in this game. It reminds me of a Packers-Chiefs game that we saw earlier this year, which is where I think Jordan Love, when he beat Patrick Mahomes doing what Patrick Mahomes does, really turned the corner for him this season. That's what I think this game's going to be. I think it's going to be one where each team may only touch the football once in the first quarter. It might be 7-7 at the end of the first quarter or 7-3, but I think that we're looking at long sustained drives with the clock moving a lot here. I think the name of the game for really both of these teams and both of these quarterbacks and why they've been so good is just get to the fourth quarter in a 1-score game. Give yourself a shot to win. And I think that's what we see here. I think that we don't necessarily see big chunk plays out of either offense, especially if Gabe Davis is going to be out again for Buffalo. We know Kansas City's very unlikely to hit the deep ball because even if they try, Marquez Valdez-Scantling would probably drop the wide open touchdown pass. So I think it's going to be moving the football down the field. I'll lean under. The computer's right on the number. If I had to play it, though, it would be under.
RJ, any thoughts on the total or any specific player props that jump out at you?
Yeah, I'd also be looking to the under. It feels like a game. We saw that first meeting was 20-17. Feels like it could be a similar game here in that situation. You could also look at the team total unders. I'd be a little more confident in playing the Chiefs with how many field goals they're kicking. But I think the Bills number right now is probably like 24.5. And so if you like Kansas City to cover this at all and win the game, I think under 24.5 is a smash spot for the Bills.
And how about any individual players you have your eye on? Khalil Shakir has been a favorite. James Cook has been a favorite, cashing for people last game. What do you think?
If I'm going to play anyone, it's probably Dalton Kincaid's over. I mean, he's really emerged as like the key guy, even more than Diggs. It seemed like every time they needed a big play in that Pittsburgh game, which wasn't that often because they were ahead by a decent amount toward the end there, but it seemed like he was the one catching the big downfield plays. So I think they can use Diggs a little bit more of a decoy, knowing that the great Kansas City cornerbacks that they have are going to shut him down and try to run the pass offense through Kincaid a little bit and get his number up. It probably shouldn't be anywhere near a Travis Kelce number, just knowing his history, but he might look a little bit like Travis Kelce in this game by the time we get to the end.
That's a good look because of how strong the Chiefs are outside. Mike, what about you? Any props that you're looking at right now?
Always looking at Patrick Mahomes rushing whenever you get to a situation like this. Always speculate that he wants to run a little more when the guy on the other side is doing it, seeing Josh Allen. But he frankly has to sometimes with the weapons he's got out there. So I love when he gets to this point in the season and he's healthy because he can take off and run. Look at the rushing yards. Look at the attempts. It really comes down to, do you think the Chiefs have a legitimate shot of winning this game? If you do, I think you have to love the over 4.5 rushing attempts for Patrick Mahomes. Whoever wins this game is extremely likely to at least get the one kneel down, maybe 2 or 3. I would be stunned, win or lose, if Patrick Mahomes has less than 5 rushing attempts in this game.
Wow, that was a painful memory you just brought up, a fresh memory of Josh Allen not getting a kneel down yesterday, finishing with 8 attempts, but I know it wasn't an intentional reference from you, Mikey. Okay, guys, let's get to the best bets recap. RJ, I'm going to start with you. Round up your top 2 plays for divisional weekend.
Yeah, I have the lines -6. I think that line should be 7 or maybe even a little bit higher. I just think they're in a different weight class than the Buccaneers, who had a really easy opponent last week, and the Lions battle tested all season. This is going to be the toughest team that the Buccaneers have faced in a while. And then Aaron Jones going over 95.5 rush plus receiving yards, like the combo number here instead of his rush total, because we get the situation where if the Packers are down big, he's going to be a big factor in the receiving game. Well, I think he gets to 100 yards rushing and receiving one way or another.
I like your Aaron Jones play a lot. I'm opposite you with the Buccaneers. I believe in that defense that's given up 1 TD in the last 10 quarters, and I believe Todd Bowles' blitzing can give Jared Goff some issues, and they can get the back door. Baker Mayfield, 7 of the last 8 times he's been a dog, he has covered the spread. And Cade Otton, his favorite target in the wildcard weekend win over the Eagles, 11 targets, him getting 31 receiving yards seems very doable against a Lions team that is basically average against opposing tight ends. Mikey, what about you?
Yeah, well, I love the Packers once again. Unfortunately, we did miss it at 10 here. Still like it at 9.5. As I was talking about, to watch the full show, though, I'm okay with you waiting just to see if there's any buying back. I don't mind the 9 versus 9.5. I think there's very little chance it moves to 8.5, but there certainly could be a shot that we see it move back to 10. So if you're comfortable waiting it out, I'm fine with that. And then the Kansas City Chiefs side, I like the spot for the Chiefs. I think that Buffalo is dealing with a number of injuries, most notably on the defensive side of the ball. This is where Patrick Mahomes typically uses his legs, is able to sustain drives. I think the offense turned a corner just a little bit, and I cannot overstate how good the Chiefs defense is right now. By far the best defense Patrick Mahomes has had to work with in his career. It is by far the worst offense that they've been so far. I will trust him to be able to figure that out in a 1-game win or go home situation. And if you want to lean over on his rushing, I like the over 25.5 rushing yards, the over 4.5 rushing attempts. The last time these two met in the playoffs, I believe he had 7 rushing attempts, around 70 rushing yards. I think it's a good look on Mahomes.
Last thing for RJ, and we got a question from Moshe in the chat, who I believe his wife is about to have a baby, but he needs to know before they go into labor, Dalton Kincaid over 38.5 or not? RJ.
Yeah, I take him over 38.5. And you look at his game log. I mean, he's got, I believe, even before this last week where he led the Bills in receiving, I think, had 2 80-yard games. So, I mean, he's just emerging in this offense. And he's starting to look like on the scoreboard, in the stat sheet, at least Travis Kelce a little bit. So I think these numbers are going to be too low and they need to catch up to him. He should be one of those tight ends that get into the 50s, really.
Guys, thank you so much. We are going to be back all week long with more coverage of these 4 games starting 10 a.m. tomorrow for the early edge. And then, of course, throughout the weekend, an hour before kickoff, going game by game, prop by prop. So keep it here on this channel. Thanks for joining us and good luck this week.